All right, good evening, everybody. We're going to call the meeting to order, Milton School Committee meeting for March 20th, 2024. And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right. So first, we'll just approve our agenda for tonight, and I don't think I know of any changes, but does anyone else have changes to suggest?
No, Selena, correct me if I'm wrong. School building committee, I don't think we've met.
Okay.
So there's probably
We have,
school building committee.
that's right, we have not.
Okay,
Report.
that's fine.
Yeah,
I
we're
think
meeting
I
next
remember we put that on tentative.
Yes, we're meeting next Monday.
All right, we'll take that out, no problem. Any other changes? Okay. So the next item will just be our citizen speak time, when we get to hear comments from members of our community who join us to share their perspective. We have up to 15 minutes in our agenda for this, for members of the community to speak for up to 3 minutes. And I don't believe we have anybody in person who's here for Citizen Speak, but is there anybody online who would like to participate in Citizen Speak? If so, can you please raise your hand at this time? Okay, it doesn't look like anybody's raising your hand online. Just a few more seconds in case you wanted to participate in Citizen Speak. Please raise your hand now. All right, so we'll just keep going, and that brings us right into the superintendent's report. So,
Great.
hand it over to you, Peter.
Thank you. Just quickly, in our last meeting, I shared the timeline for our implementation planning. This is following the priority report. That priority report is going out this week, so we have been doing final edits on that, and excited to share that broadly with the community. And I'll be sharing that in my monthly update, that letter that I send out to people, and frame it and frame the work we've done within that communication. We are kind of finishing compiling all of the data that we gathered from the in-service day that we had with all staff. It's been really, really helpful in just reviewing that as a team already to see some of the themes come through, and that is going to be really helpful as we bring an implementation team together, which will be an advisory team. They'll be reviewing that data. They'll be also working to do stakeholder input as well. So it's not just one person going back out to the community, but it's a representative team that's helping to facilitate that, and will then be gathering even a kind of a final set of feedback to build into our plan, and plan not just for next year, but a multi-year plan going forward. So excited about that. There's a lot to kind of sift through. I think one of the challenges we face in this process is there's so many recommendations of things that people want to see happen, and prioritizing these things is challenging. Looking at what is our capacity as an organization, and then really, I think, simplifying the message and the focus so that all staff and community can focus on a few things, as opposed to, we have 500 things to do next year and we have this much time to do it. Mm-hmm. And we probably won't get anything done if we approach it that way. So we both have to sustain many things happening at once, but we have to distill this into a more simplified vision that people can understand and hold on to, I think, to really move us forward next year. So that's kind of the frame that I have as I look at the work that we have to do over the next few months. Wanted to also mention policy team, who are sitting right here, have been doing great work. Part of that policy work, which I just wanted to mention, is also residency. I know this has been talked about in the community. Just wanted to give a brief update here. We have been working, Danielle Wetmore, who is our Director of Student Services, has been working with our registrar, and they've been doing a bunch of research looking at other communities throughout the metro area to see what their policies look like and what changes we might want to make to our policies. So it's similar to some of the policies we're looking at tonight. We're reviewing this policy and looking at, are there ways that we can either strengthen the policy itself or our practice, and are kind of nearing the finish line in terms of having a draft of that. So in a future meeting, we'll be sharing that work. And if there is an impact in terms of that'll come to the policy committee in terms of changes to our MPS policy. And then just a quick update on kindergarten enrollment. We are at 349, have completed the enrollment interest questionnaire. Right now we have 325 students, so it's an uptick of about 25. So we have an additional class, it looks like, for next year, and working on where that class will go, and Glenn is holding all of the knowledge on that. And that's my update.
Any questions?
No, thank you. I'm excited to.
Yep.
Yeah.
I guess this is a parking lot probably, but your update around the kindergarten enrollment does make me curious about where we're at with the pre-K program.
In terms of what?
In terms of like just we're moving forward with the same numbers and space that we've had this year with that. Is that safe? Is that
I
maybe
think
not?
so.
We don't need to talk about it right now, but I'm just realizing that as we think about adding a new kindergarten classroom, like that will not affect our pre-K is pretty much set as is.
Yeah.
No, we're looking at where we have a bubble classroom coming off in 5th grade, and that's where the
Got it,
extra
okay.
kindergarten class will go.
Okay.
So it's, it's a question of how many classes roll off in 5th to tell you where you have kindergarten classes. So
Okay.
that's,
Thanks.
we've identified a school, we haven't identified a room yet.
For the, just on that point, the 340, right, as of now, do we have a general sense of, right, where traditionally we are in March versus where that ends up being in September?
We are
Like-
actually 25 up from where we were at this point last year.
Okay. Okay, 25 from where we were. So that's still,
March to March.
yeah.
Marty McKenna gives us data weekly as to how many kindergarten students have been pre-registered, and she's been giving us the data as to where we were 1 year ago that week.
Gotcha.
So we are up 25 from this week last year. So we do expect a good 25 more students in kindergarten next year than we have this year.
And typically we would expect like a little bit of increase from now to through the summer, smallish numbers as families move in, or
Yeah, it varies from year to year, but there are always registrations. Although, parents of children entering kindergarten are usually sort of on top of that. It's a big deal. So the late registrations tend to be people who are moving into town and things like that at this point. Not so much people said, "Oh, I forgot to register my child for kindergarten." That's not as common at this point in the year.
okay, thanks.
But we don't have, with that 25, we don't have right now, we have a plan in terms of space, so we're not.
Yes.
Yeah, and you'll just kind of keep us all.
We currently have
updated on
15
that.
kindergartens this year, which is actually down one from last year. This will bring us back up to 16. And we have the space for that.
Okay.
If 25 more children came in between now and September 1st, I would tell you that would be a different story, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Okay.
Or someone would tell you in September that would be a different story, maybe not me.
All right, well, I can actually see, it says chair's report there. We're actually in the superintendent's report at this point in the agenda, and you can just keep going.
Right.
Student Opportunity Act.
Yep. So this is a requirement for this to come before the school committee for approval. It's a required DESE plan. We, as you all know, we are kind of still working on the development of our implementation plan, but we do know what we've put in this SOA plan aligns to both what all our staff are talking about and what we've been talking about, which is the development of MTSS, multi-tiered system of supports, and the systems that support students at all levels to both remediate, accelerate, and do it in a way that we can monitor and evaluate our progress, make changes to the system itself. It's when we had our breakout sessions at our in-service day, we had a Java-like session and then an interest-based. In the interest-based session, we had how many sections of people wanted to do MTSS? Was it 3?
At least 3, yeah. We had like 60 people or so wanted to talk about MTSS.
So it's not a surprise to anyone. Everyone sees this as a need, which is exciting that there's that much convergence on this. Glenn, anything to add? Glenn was instrumental
as part
in
of
helping
the
put this
Student
together.
Opportunity Act 3 years ago, the legislature put in the language that every district had to have an SOA plan, a 3-year plan, and that this is a rolling requirement. It doesn't sunset with the 6 years of the implementation of the Student Opportunity Act. It's perpetual. But the plan changed a little in format this year. It basically has a series of focus areas that it asks you to choose from, and a sequence of their metrics that they would like you to take a look at in terms of fulfilling them. So you were supposed to choose 1 to 3 focus areas and metrics. We chose 2, both around MTSS, because, as you said, that was an obvious choice given the interests of the people. And so we just built the plan around that. This has to be submitted by April 1st, and it has to be voted by the school committee as part of the law. So, and I've given you a copy of it's now done electronically through the GEM system, and so you have a PDF of the sort of things we have to do to put it in there.
Make a motion to approve the Student Opportunity Act plan as submitted.
Second. With that on the floor, I think I appreciate the clarity of the presentation of where we're at. I think it's important that we can stay focused on these, as it says here, like, clearly we need to build evidence-based programming around these specific groups to help address the achievement gaps. Like, that's, I'm not sure we've always been quite that clear in how we pinpoint, like, what we have to do. So that's good, and I'm glad to see that. You can't actually address it if you can't actually clearly articulate what you have to do. So.
Yeah, VIVU dug into the data from the state as to identifying the targeted groups, the groups they suggested should be targeted, and went through the data on it. And then Karen McDavitt and Danielle Wetmore helped with the creation of the document.
I do have a question on page 11. It says we anticipate hiring an additional reading interventionist in FY26. Is that an
I
additional?
was hedging my bets.
Oh,
We're hoping to do it in 25, but
okay. Okay, so this isn't in addition to the 2 that you have on for the needs-based.
this is hopefully one of the needs-based.
Okay, got it.
Don't want to promise too much in FY25. We'll see what we can do, but
I'm hoping you can
by-
work some
by year
miracles.
2. Well, it's always better to.
Yeah.
Pessimists are never disappointed, is that the line?
So Lena, do you have any questions or comments?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Okay. So in that case, I think the motion's been made and seconded, so we can just take a vote, and I think we do a roll call vote.
Yes.
So Member Loring,
Yes.
Member Varghese?
Yes.
Dr. Miranda?
Yes.
I'm a yes also. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you. So our next item up is Kat DeRoche is here, which is always great, to share a little bit about the work that we are doing on literacy and kind of honing in on reading, essentially. We've talked about, I think over the last year, we've talked about curricular updates, adoptions. The science of reading is something that everybody in the country has been talking about for the last 4 years or so. So I thought it would be helpful for Kat to come and just share a little bit about the work that she's been leading to engage in this, and kind of looking beyond Milton to other partners that we're working with. I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming.
Sure. I always welcome the opportunity to share what we're doing. I think it's easy to kind of just chug along and keep doing what you're doing, but if we're not elevating the conversation, it can seem as if we're not kind of focusing in on certain things, so I appreciate it. So as Dr. Burrows said, I'm Kat DeRoche. I'm the preschool to 8 literacy director, and I'm here to really talk about a few things, where we are now, where we've been, what systems we have in place, where we're looking to go, and then what our next steps are, and some miscellaneous resources that I think I'm shamelessly plugging, having the audience of the public and a recording. So thank you for indulging that.
And the Milton Times.
And the Milton Times, yeah, of course. So thank you for that. So as Dr. Burrows said, the purpose really is to give information on the current state of literacy instruction, and also where we want to go in light of the last 4 years and the necessary attention given to literacy instruction, and to clarify next steps. I think science of reading is a really exciting topic that's come to the fore more ubiquitously than usually things in education do. And I think a misconception is that it's a new sort of understanding or trend, and the reality is it's been around for almost 50 years, this understanding that reading instruction is a science and can be traced through brain science. And I won't nerd out too much on that piece. I will keep it very layman's, but it's an exciting topic that I, luckily it's an occupational hazard that I get to delve into it. So we can move forward. So as I said, I'll talk a little bit about our current programs, our pedagogy, and our process currently, the systems we have in place currently to examine the effectiveness of our program pedagogy and process. We'll look ahead to next steps, and then I'll share some resources. So, what we have going on now. Our Tier 1 resource for curriculum in grades K to 5, and that's primarily the focus that I'll be discussing tonight. I'm, of course, happy to answer questions about 6 to 8, but when we think about the science of reading, the foundational skills are really paramount to this process. So Our program currently is National Geographic's Reach for Reading. It's a comprehensive K-5 core curriculum that we implemented here in Milton in 2016 after a full curricular review. We moved away from units of study, the Lucy Calkins curriculum, and adopted with a very large, robust committee, Reach for Reading. We also implement Heggerty, which is a phonemic awareness set of lessons that are implemented currently in preschool and kindergarten in all classrooms. If you've heard your student talking about Mrs. Botari, that is Heggerty, and it's very engaging. UFly Foundations comes out of the University of Florida Literacy Institute, and it's a systematic and explicit phonics program. It's used right now universally in our Tier 2 small group reading, grades 1 and 2. It's being piloted at the kindergarten level in one of our elementary schools, so we're looking at that as a potential high lever, low expense next step in the short term, which I'll go into in a little while. So what's been getting a lot of attention is programming, curricular materials, which is a really big part of instruction. But equally as important, maybe arguably more important, is pedagogy, or the way we teach literacy, or any subject really. So making sure that we can put all kinds of materials in place, but if we don't have the right approach, it's going to fall flat, and vice versa. If we have a great approach, teachers are required to build their own materials in isolation. That's also not good practice. So we really look to balance these two things in a way that's meaningful and accessible to teachers. So making sure that we have thematic, standards-based units of study for all students, providing high-quality, grade-level instruction and material is the most equitable thing we can do in education. Making sure that we meet students where they are, which is just as important to have small group instruction as part of your literacy block, because we know our students are not always right in that grade level. Sometimes they're going beyond, sometimes they're coming along. So we do that as well. We have explicit phonics instruction with a particular focus on that in grades K to 2, though that has floated up into 3 and 4 given the past 5 years of landscape with COVID. We use data-driven instruction and intervention. We've recently implemented DIBBLES through MClass, Boost Reading, which is a diagnostic and personalized platform, and then curriculum-embedded unit assessments. So this timeline is really to illustrate what's been going on since we implemented Reach for Reading. So in 2016, as I said, we had a year-long, the 15-16 school year was a year-long curriculum review. We implemented in the fall of 2016, moving away from the Lucy Calkins units of study to implement Reach for Reading. That same team stayed on to develop anchor documents. Any curriculum that's provided to teachers includes many, many hours of instruction per day. It almost is as confusing as not having anything at times. So that team really worked to delineate and articulate what it was that was essential to teach each day with minutes and resources. We provided collaborative time. That was, I think, when we saw common planning time really take a presence in our elementary schedules. So that went forward, which was really helpful. We all know what happened 2020 to 2022. We made necessary shifts in how instruction was delivered and that materials were used. So we made some major shifts in all content areas that were necessary, but that certainly left an impact on our teaching and learning. Coming out of that in 2022-23, last academic year, we rolled out and teachers implemented a brand new math and social studies curriculum district-wide K to 5. So that was pretty robust and a lot of work for the teachers. And then this year, a literacy team was formed, cross-secting all schools, all grades from K to 8. So we have a literacy leadership team that's been meeting since October, and one of those subgroups is focused on looking at our Tier 1 curriculum in grades K to 5. I think the thing to think about after looking at that timeline as we think about systems is, and something that I belong to a South Shore Literacy Leaders Network, and we're hosting actually a meeting here in Milton on Friday. And we talk a lot about these things because it's very, it's important to calibrate with other districts who are experiencing similar changes in the landscape, or just our understandings are growing and what we're seeing with kids and teachers. And something that I shared at a meeting that seemed to resonate with some is that I've really found myself balancing these ideas of urgency with thoughtfulness. So making sure that we're really thinking deeply about how it is we teach students and what we're asking teachers to do and what they are rising to the occasion to do, and also being thoughtful about how to do that in ways that are supportive and not just, providing resources that we don't have the time or capacity to support. And so I think it's important to share that, because I think that it's important for us to be urgent but also thoughtful, and that's the lens through which I'm really entering into this, or have been using this year as we work with teacher teams. So when we look at systems, as I mentioned, the literacy leadership team is comprised of 20 educators, K-8 representing all schools. We have 3 subgroups. One is focused on assessment. How do we assess students? How do we communicate those assessments using our materials? As I mentioned, the curriculum review, K-5, that team. And then we have a vertical alignment team that is with teachers from grades 3 to grade 8. And we're really looking at how do we ensure that students are having consistent learning experiences. And so we're creating some documents that we're going to be sharing with teacher teams. We meet monthly to work in our respective groups and see that there's a lot of overlap among the 3. But for this focus, I'll talk a little bit about the curriculum review team. They have created a staff survey that I'll share in a moment. We had a really high participation rate. They're reviewing ed reports, and Curate's the local version of ed reports, to see what they're saying about curricula. And they're going to be, at the end of the year, proposing next steps. And some of that I'll share tonight because they're a very engaged group of educators, and we've had some great conversation. Okay. So in terms of data collection, we have many systems of data collection, but the 3 that kind of speak to this topic, obviously growth and performance data. That could include MCAS data, that could include our internal data when it comes to screeners and diagnostics. So we look at that. And on the aggregate, we're doing quite well. And I think, after hearing what you were talking about with MTSS and thinking about the Student Opportunities Act, we do have overall some really good data. I think when we disaggregate that data and we look closely, we have some work to do, and we're not alone in that. That illustration of the aggregate has, in the last 2 or 3 years, left us out of the grant opportunities through DESE. We've applied to many grants. We had an early literacy grant, a quality materials grant. We submitted on behalf of all of the elementary schools, and we're in sort of the performing too well category to qualify for some of these grants. So we'll continue to apply. This is still something that we will continue to do. As I mentioned, the staff survey related to current resources. So back in 2015, we did survey staff to see where they felt their materials were, what they needed, what they were noticing. So we wanted to do something similar. Questions revolving around, do you find your materials cover all components of structured literacy block? Do you supplement any materials on your own? Questions like that. And while that survey was due on Thursday of last week, so the culling of that data is not ready to be shared publicly yet, I did think it was important to share the respondent rate. There was a 79% respondent rate. So within 3 or 4 days, 95 out of 120 staff members in all grades responded to this survey. It also included special educators, reading specialists, EL teachers, paraprofessionals. So it kind of breaks down by grade, but this is also from all schools, which is really encouraging. I think it's really important to, it would have told me something if data was only collected from certain subgroups of teachers. I think this, showed that there was a willingness to communicate around needs and wanting to engage in this conversation. So as noted, materials are part of this, and learning about current evidence, research, and practice is another large part of this. So this is an outline of summarizing what the committee and I have been talking about, which would be the ideal. So this is a skeleton of a proposal of what could be moving forward, what we do in order to make sure that our materials are up to date and current, that our teachers have what they need, and that we're meeting the needs of students. So in the fall, it would be great to engage all K-5 staff in science of reading practices with, I'm thinking, 2 different tracks. We do have a large group of teachers who have engaged on their own. We have teachers that are running PDs about the science of reading and current evidence-based practices, which again are not a far cry from what we're doing. But again, if we want to make sure that we're using our systematic and what's known to be true and evidence-based, we need to make sure we're all on the same page. So providing all teachers with the same baseline of understanding. Gathering formal representative curriculum committee. So the committee we have now is a really good start, and I think it's really laid the groundwork to look at how we want to move forward. But they too were saying we really want to engage in some more PD to understand what it is we're looking for. And then potentially piloting some materials. So in this group, there are districts that have implemented a lot of the curricula that are on ed reports, and they're very willing to have us into their schools. I think it will be important, though, to make sure that the lens through which we're looking at these materials is the same. So we could look at materials first, which has been the traditional way of curriculum review, and then do the backfill of understanding. But really, I think it's important to make sure that we all have the understanding of what we're looking for and what is the best thing that we want to, if there's a way to implement something new or better, that we know what we're looking for. We then use rubrics inclusive of anti-bias and state-based rubrics. There are a million out there. But I think it's important to make sure that that group also creates a rubric that includes all of these pieces to it, both from the literacy side, anti-bias side, and make sure that we're representative of all that's out there. And then the idea would be, if there are recommendations from the committee, that they communicate it to central office in the late winter. So following that, after kind of looking at the why or the theory, and then looking at materials, engaging the what and how. So if there are new materials, or if we're shoring up what we already have, we engage with those before leaving for the summer. So if there is something new that we would adopt and implement, that teachers have the opportunity to see and handle and experience those before leaving. If you've ever been a teacher, walking into your classroom in September and having boxes that you have to unpack and get to know before, while you're hanging up, everybody's name on their lockers and making sure that everything's just so, it can be very overwhelming, and that's not the way we want anyone to start their year. But this would be a way to bring in teachers together and make sure that they understand and are familiar with, if anything, before they leave for the year. And then over the summer, working on adjustments to pacing and curriculum as we go forward. Looking ahead. So those last slides were sort of where my brain goes, and I, thinking about the end in mind and making sure, just kind of an overview of where this thought process has led me. But immediate next steps for me, the committee, and my work with central office is to examine the staff feedback on the current state and materials, bring together the initial gleanings in a way that's digestible to central office, to you all, to the teaching community, seeing if there are short-term supports. So if out of this survey it comes to light that there's a need that's immediate, again, this balancing of urgency and thoughtfulness If we were to get something for the fall, that feels super rushed and not very thoughtful. So are there things, high leverage, low cost things we can do to support teachers right now going into next year? And then collaborative planning of professional development sessions. So I presented my ideal. I have colleagues that have other competing interests, and I understand. And there's, as Dr. Burrows was saying earlier, the implementation plan has yet to be codified, and so thinking about this in relation to that will be really important. And thinking about what that schedule might look like in light of those priorities will be very important. All right, that's my shameless plug. So in the signature of my email, if you've ever gotten an email from me, there's a link to a website that is linked on our main website, but it's a preschool to 12 ELA site. It's still a work in progress, but it has an overview of our Tier 1 curricula, Tier 2 supports and assessments, lots of state and national resources, and there will be further updates to come. Then I also wanted to share the mass literacy website. I was on a team of state teachers, administrators, and actually in higher ed all the way to preschool. And I was a contributor to this website, and it really goes into depth on the components of an effective literacy block. There'll be family and caregiver resources to come. Lots and lots of, it's incredible amount of information, but it's a good place to go if you're curious or interested in learning more, and a lot about equity and literacy as well. So I wanted to highlight those for anyone that is interested. So thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Sure.
I feel like you have a lot.
You go first.
No, I'll follow you.
Thank you. I really appreciate
Sure.
you coming up. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much for sharing. Just a few. So again, our current curriculum is Nat Geo. Is it
Yeah.
safe to say that we are looking to move away from Nat Geo after next year, essentially, with this curriculum review?
So that's a good question.
Yeah.
So in 2019, Ed Reports came out with, so we implemented in 16, in 19, Ed Reports came out with a very, many different curricula they had reviewed, and Nat Geo partially meets their expectations.
Yep.
Now, we could go sort of back and forth on why and why not, and their process. But I do think, like anything, the further away you get from implementing something, you kind of lose sight of why it was so. So when we implemented in 16, we had all these tight structures. A lot has happened since then. I think we've fallen away from some of those, and we've also realized that there are other resources out there that could give us more streamlined and stronger fidelity. I don't know for sure if we'll move away. My hunch is that we have two very strong buckets of need. K-2 or K-3 is that foundational phonics and more explicit and systematic. That products have kind of come a long way since then. And in grades 3 to 5, the writing piece, we've always identified that in Reach for Reading as something we needed to bolster, and it just fell flat. And so those are the two areas I would say we're looking for. And while I can't say for sure that's what we're doing, that's what I'm hearing. So we'll have to see.
That was kind of my second question is your assessment essentially that like there can be one curriculum to fix like all these things, or that you might try and again use EL instruction, EL education for your fiction and nonfiction kind of reading comprehension? You might use something else for writing, or an entirely different curriculum for kind of your K through 2 phonics and phonemic awareness and
so that's something that certainly is on the table. I think I don't want to exclude any possibilities, having not met with teacher teams and sort of dug into this. I will say that through conversation with colleagues in other places and spaces, that it does get really complicated when you bring in multiple resources when it comes to like the foundational, like any of those 6 components of the literacy block. Splitting them up seems hard. And the phonemic awareness feels a little more tangible because it's 20 minutes of each day, and it feels a little more accessible for those kids. But it could be that we split it up. it would take a lot more work on the front end to make that plan and that expectation for teachers between the spring and the fall.
Yeah.
But not impossible. So
Yeah, it's hard. I think in every curriculum has
Yeah.
weak points.
there's
And
no
so-
perfect thing. Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
how
not.
you strengthen or any of those. Is that okay?
That's, I think musicians.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's not a phone.
would the idea be, and not to put you in any box or anything like that, so because I know you haven't had the review and
Yep.
there are lots of opinions you want.
He does this to everybody.
I apologize. But like is the idea to do some type of review and implementation of a new potentially a new ELA curriculum simultaneously K through 5 or maybe K through 8, or would the hope be, in FY25 or FY26 that you maybe roll it out with a couple grades and then a couple grades the following year? Like, or what's a potential rollout plan as you
Yep.
thought about it? Just because I worry about, honestly,
Yeah.
like my perspective, I worry about our capacity
Absolutely.
to support all those
Fund this.
teachers, right?
Yeah,
You're
yeah, yeah.
already working across
Yes.
a significant
Yeah.
swath
Span.
of teachers.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think so. In 2016, I was my role was assistant principal at Tucker, so it was a bit different. I wasn't the orchestrator of the process, but I was very heavily involved with. My background is as a reading specialist, and so the proposal was to do what you're describing, do like a K2, and then sort of grow it up with the kids who were experiencing it. There was it was like a light mutiny, I want to say. It was a very strong feeling of, no, we all need this.
Yeah.
I think Janet Sheehan called up to Glenn and said they're not going to, it was tongue-in-cheek, but it was pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
But we were making a significant shift at that point in terms of curricular resources. I think that, as you say, I have not engaged in this fully. Nobody has.
Yeah.
I think we'll need to see, because you're right. So part of the reason for that timeline was to illustrate that it's a really big deal for a teacher to implement a brand new curriculum in a core area. So social studies and math happening
Yeah.
last year was of course I was like, we need to talk about reading.
Yeah.
And, I waited my turn, which is totally fine. But recognizing that even in year 2, it's a lot for teachers to do. So
Yeah.
thinking through and leveraging, how are we going to get the most and be able to support the most people is going to be a real priority. The worst thing would be to use a lot of financial resources to say that we have something and for it not to be supported in a way that will positively impact teachers and students. So I think that's definitely part of the thought process when we think about next steps. To your point, it's a really hard thing to support 6th grade levels of teachers in 4 different schools with a new curricular resource. So
Yeah.
certainly
And
can be
it's
step by
also,
step.
I think it's also, I think historically more of this rollout has happened at kind of sporadically. I mean, it hasn't been a coordinated, centralized process where district-wide, like from the central office. I mean, that's the change that we're moving towards is honing in and putting all resources so that Kat's not doing this on her own and trying to build an assessment system on her own and all these things. Like, we have work to do across subject areas. I mean, this will all come out in the implementation plan, but that will further support and cement this so that we're not buying a new textbook, like Kat's saying, and kind of hoping it works.
Yeah.
We'll be actually looking at teaching practice. We'll be looking at an assessment system that's tied across all subject areas that is kind of communicating information back to us in ways that we can make changes. And so, I mean, some of this is just supporting each other and being really thoughtful around design and then having a long-term plan so we don't implement something and then when it's not working in a year, or there's, the Boston Globe runs another article that says, well, actually, these ones are better now. And then we rush over and get those, and then, right, like, this has played out in education for millennia.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter how strong the curriculum is if the teachers don't understand it, don't have the time to
Yep.
internalize it,
Yeah.
don't have the time or the people supporting them and giving them feedback on how they're implementing it and cross-collaborate with each other. And so I just think
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
the question of how you do that with fidelity across
Right.
7 grades
Yeah.
I completely hear your point and can
Yeah.
definitely see that of like, as soon as teachers see this is like a great resource and this is really helping me, my kids, they're going to want that. And, like,
Exactly.
the idea of I need to wait 2 years, right, because
know.
my turn is down here, like that's hard.
It's hard.
And not to mention the impact on kids. If you know this is
Exactly.
really working, you want kids to have it as soon as possible. But again, like, so
Yeah.
that just comes back to how are we preparing and providing the resources, you know, in my mind, like, you know, just human personnel to like help with the implementation across
Yeah.
the school sites, be in teachers' classrooms, work with the principals, APs, because you're right, and it's
Yeah.
a ton of work to overhaul. And ELA is the biggest one of any of them, really, because again,
Yes.
it's writing, grammar, you know, how to read, nonfiction, fiction, just so much goes into it.
Well, it's well articulated. Like that is exactly why this idea of like urgency and thoughtfulness, like, you know,
Yeah.
there are times, you know, I read that, you know, we've been reading and listening to all these things and all of a sudden it's like you wake up in a panic and you're like, we have to change it tomorrow. And I was like, no, we need to like make sure people feel successful, front load the PD. And I think that's a shift for us for sure, is front loading the PD so that what you're saying can happen. We can know that and have that before even introducing anything new, if that's the direction it goes. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, only thing I'd name from a timeline perspective, I know you talked about kind of winter of potentially
Yeah.
knowing what you might want to do and sharing that from the budget
Budget,
timeline,
yeah.
which is not your issue, Glenn, of like having
Yeah.
we obviously need some since then, more like November
Yep.
than certainly
Okay.
January. So
All right.
Glenn's like,
Sounds like, that's not my problem. Good luck, guys.
we'll be on call.
No, but that's helpful. See, this
Yeah.
is November. Okay, fine. All right. Well,
Pause that.
Okay. I mean, you did cover a
A lot
couple
of
of
what you're
my
gonna say. That's okay.
questions, which is awesome. Think like. No. Pretend I think like him. So I know you're collecting data,
Yeah.
and I am curious to see how this curriculum, since it was implemented in 2016 to now, has affected. I know COVID was like a big part of it, but like affected definitely our, you know, lower performing subgroups, you know, and how that's been challenging. I've read up a lot on
Yeah.
balanced literacy and structured literacy and
all the differences.
all of that, and
Yeah.
there's a lot out there. So I was kind of curious, like, what is kind of, I mean, obviously I know you're still collecting data, but I wanted to get from you, like, what are you seeing, you
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
what are kind of, and I'm glad, so yes, I would like to.
Sure. We'll start there. How's that?
We'll start there.
So, yeah, I mean, I think when I look at it longitudinally, so I started in Milton as a third grade teacher in 2011, and we were doing units of study. And so, in teaching that, I was even trained before then. I taught kindergarten in Roxbury, so like was doing units of study there too. I will say that when we switched from units of study to Reach for Reading, we saw a definite uptick in performance from across all subgroups, in particular our lower performing subgroups. A lot of that was because it's more structured. Again, we shifted from balanced to structured, and even just that approach, I think, if I'm to hypothesize, that approach in pedagogy gave us, you know, an edge. It's hard to say because, as you know, COVID was a huge factor, in particular for our most at-risk subgroups as well. So I don't know how to tease out and detangle, you know, what impacted what. What I will say is, and you know, it's public, so it's not a secret or anything, but when we disaggregate the data, and this is a national trend in literacy and math and in all subject areas, we do, you know, have subgroups that we are not supporting or moving along the achievement line as much. I don't know that a new curriculum is necessarily why. I do think it's training and access to PD and having time to spend with teachers, collaborating and talking about best practices, both rooted in what we can access for resources and collaborating with one another. You know, we have some really strong talent here, and I think, you know, Dr. Burrows was talking about reviewing the priority report and just having teachers in the same room. We haven't really done that since COVID, and like when it was happening, we all were kind of like, oh, right, we used to do this. Like we used to be in the same room, which is so weird to say in 2024 because it's been a couple years now. But the sharing of practices within the scope of the priority report even helped with that as well. And so I think really thinking about how we can structure those conversations for teachers because, you know, as you say, the curricular tool did help us shift to be able to meet student needs in a more powerful way. But that's not it, you know. So it's a definite balance between how do teachers feel our resources are meeting the needs of the kids in front of them, and how can we support the understanding behind those resources.
Okay. Thank you. And so my other question is, I know in our needs-based budget this year we have 2 reading interventionists that were added for 4th and 5th grade. What was kind of the reasoning behind adding those positions?
Yep. So when we think about Tier 2 in a general ed model, here in Milton, we have a 1st and 2nd grade reading specialist in each elementary school. And depending on the data, we shift what their caseload looks like because we, you know, in the definition of equity, we take everybody's data, we put it in a spreadsheet, we see where the need is, we divvy it up more or less. We talk with teachers and we look at other data, but when we get sort of that swath of information, we make sure that the resources are allocated where needed, not just in a certain building. Third grade, we have our 2 district reading specialists, and that's similar as well. We kind of address the needs that we see based on a calibration of data. 4 and 5, we don't have a formal Tier 2. We have Tier 2 when it comes to classroom teachers, and they pull small groups. But there's no additional staff for that role. And then when students get into Pierce Middle School, there's a reading strategies class with a reading specialist. And so what we've seen over the years since implementing the 3rd grade reading specialist district-wide is that families, rightly so, and teachers are saying, so they get help grades 1, 2, and 3, and they get help 6, 7, 8. So what happens in 4 and 5? And, you know, I remind teachers, like, you are so good. You are, you know, most elementary teachers by nature are ELA people, right? Brian Seelig and I talk about this all the time. He said, you have all the ELA people because they're all in the classroom. But it's not to say that there isn't space for that targeted, I mean, a reading specialist training is very different from that of a classroom teacher. And so the rationale really was just kind of examining, you know, where we see our students and what their needs are. And not to keep going back to COVID because it's kind of lame to keep bringing that up, but we do see that that foundational skills gap for some students has continued, and where we didn't necessarily see the foundational need in 4 and 5, we're still seeing that as a need at the moment. So,
Great. No, this is very helpful, and I mean, I understand that we've, you know, people have been waiting, and you've been waiting, you know. So I appreciate that you are prioritizing this now, and you know, we would like to, and I'm speaking for myself, but I know my colleagues would support this. We want to support you in however we can to provide resources that you would need to make sure that this is successful. So thank you so much.
Thank you for saying that. That's great.
Beverly or Selena, do you have any questions or comments?
And that's not so much a question, but I think this is perhaps more to Dr. Wells. Just in thinking, I think, of sort of the questions that families and caregivers may have as to, you know, they might listen to the presentation, but it just might not be as digestible, right? If you're quickly sort of reading and trying to wrap your head around what's going on. And I mean, we're doing a lot. I just commend you. I think this is a huge undertaking, and I love the thoughtfulness that's being incorporated into thinking about what gets in the way of fidelity. Because you could choose, you know, other curricula, but the reality is that fidelity requires dedicated professional development, dedicated attention, looking at the data, and all of these different touch points that you need in that implementation, right, cycle and review of if it's working or not. But I'm thinking about communication, Dr. Burrows, of like, how do we make sure that this doesn't sort of get to the forefront just once a year or whenever that we have more.
Oh,
Can anybody
we
hear?
lost your
Selena, we can't hear you.
sound.
Sorry, one sec. Something's on this end, maybe.
I think it's in the control room. They're doing something.
It was just the last few seconds of what you were saying.
I heard communication.
Oh, it's still muted.
Yeah, we're still.
Is this? Sorry.
I can actually, I think
Yeah.
I got, how do you keep it at the, I heard keep it at the forefront and communication and not
The microphone is coming through on the plotted side of things, but that's on.
okay.
I'm gonna see if I can.
Okay. I will just go ahead and respond and make it up. I hope I know what you just said. So yeah, I mean, I think that like what you're articulating is really important for all the work that we're doing as we go ahead. And I mentioned before, distilling things down and focusing them. And the reason Kat's here is because this work is really important. It's the core work that we do. And it's also one of the data points that we'll be looking at as we talk about assessing how we're doing year by year. Looking at our reading scores is something we've always done, obviously, but in terms of like key performance indicators, that classic reading by third grade is there for a reason, right? It is so vitally important. So I think communicating this work in ways that everybody can understand. I think obviously staff is the starting point in terms of those that are engaging in the teaching. To understand that this is not, as we talked about before, this is not buying curricula and the curricula is going to teach. This is having a highly articulated and structured system that allows teachers to bring all their creativity and all their passion and inspiration. And alongside that, as we talked in the SOA about MTSS, we have the supports in place so that when in the general ed setting at tier 1, which is in the classroom, regular, first order of instruction, when a student needs additional support, they move to tier 2 to intervention, and then move them back into tier 1, so that so that we're catching things in ways that are those are the things that are going to shift our outcomes. So I think absolutely communicating that and engaging everybody in that work too is really important.
And I think, Dr. Miranda, if I can add on, I think what we're talking about at the district curriculum level across content areas is, with this implementation report, how can we each continuously communicate updates to the community in a way that's accessible and bite-sized while elevating the importance of the work. And we don't have I'll say, we don't, in our curriculum office, we don't have an answer for that yet, but I do think that these conversations when we're together in our leadership meetings, it's really something we know is needed, because it does feel a little, I don't know what the word is, which is weird, but it feels a little bit like, I'm here now, but I haven't, this hasn't been sort of the focus in a few years, and then Brian was doing a lot of work in math last year, and it's not that we don't have years of more or less, but the ebb and flow, but I do think it's important to have. And I know Dr. Burrows is big on systems and structures and like coming up with a system by which we can have that be accessible to people when they're ready to read it or to digest it.
Yeah, I just want to say how much alignment seems obvious between how you've just presented all of this information with how we've heard you talking about the big picture. So that is, I think, very reassuring. And I will just say, personally, I mean, I know you started by acknowledging that, like, sometimes when this could apply to any of us, right? When we're just busy doing our work, we're not like shouting from the rooftops what we're doing. That offers a natural opportunity for people to kind of make some assumptions about what may or may not be happening, and that's just normal. I mean, that's to be expected. And so I think for that reason, I'm just really thankful that you had that you recognized the value of having you, Kat, come and do this presentation tonight. Because, I mean, I know there have been questions in the community, which are valid questions. And this is good information that we should all have access to. And even just knowing that this landing page exists, I mean, I know we're moving toward a better system-wide website. Like, you have gone ahead and created this landing page in the interim just to have the information out there. But I really, I mean, every time someone asks me a question about this and I say, have you been able to refer to that landing page? You know, a lot of people still haven't known that it even exists. So just this opportunity to have you here, and like, I hope people do watch the recording of this meeting. Anybody who does have those valid questions, because I think you've provided a lot of really helpful background and context. Like, for example, even just getting a better sense from your presentation about the way we're using Haggerty infused with Reach for Reading. And I think there is, you know, and I know you referenced the Globe like article, and that's, yes, but it's a very understandable reaction to have when you like read an article about the curriculum your district is using. And I mean, it's rated. So I think that it's just, this is a helpful response, which is, you know, Reach for Reading is actually not all we're doing. It's not been all we're doing, but a lot of people, even if, as I have been having early elementary students in my house, I don't actually know the ins and outs. I'm a former English teacher, so that if that's me and I'm on school committee, and I'm learning a lot from this presentation, then that just really, I think, illustrates how helpful it is to just put it all out. The way you organize this with like the current state, I mean, this is I think what we've been needing. And I appreciate understanding more about what is happening in Tier 1 and Tier 2, and Tier Anna, like, for connecting the dots back to when we're having these conversations about why the reading interventionists are necessary. This is all that same conversation. So I appreciate this a great deal. I think the timeline is also an important, helpful for perspective, right? Because we do know that from our elementary teachers' point of view, like, the onboarding of both that math and social studies is really, we have to keep that in mind. And I appreciate your already thinking forward to the PD and that concept of front loading the PD. I really, really do appreciate that. You know, just your engagement outside of Milton, I think, is very refreshing as well. I think that's been something you have brought, Dr. Burrows. Like, we need to be doing this. We need to be looking at best practices, at research-based practices, at what other peer districts are doing that's successful, and where are they encountering challenges, so we can learn from that as well. And they're learning from us. And I mean, just taking that approach to your role, I think I appreciate, because I know there would be more than enough to keep you busy here, like, all the time, you know, without inviting colleagues in from other districts. But as you're saying, then that opens up in turn the opportunity for you to bring a team out and learn from other places. So I think it will be great to to see the data. Like, I'm not sure how you're planning to end up sharing that, but I know I'm now like very curious
Yeah.
to see what the
Happy
teachers
to-
actually shared with you. And it's just really nice to have you in here live, you know, in person to
Oh, yeah. I could talk about this all day.
bring it to life. Bring it to life,
Yep.
because like it's a topic of a lot of conversation.
And
in
it should, I
town.
mean,
yeah,
to a
and
large extent, it should be. Like, this is so,
Totally. It's-
I mean, reading is
it's the
is
foundation
essential.
of
Like,
everything.
it's
Yes.
regardless. I was talking to Christy, the science director, and Brian, math, and I just said, like, we should just all be sitting in on this PD, and it doesn't matter what content it is, because really the, like, learning how a brain learns how to read is essentially how your brain learns how to learn, and that is the foundation for the approach we should all be taking. And I don't want anyone to walk away and think teachers aren't doing that right now. It's not that nobody's doing it, it's that we as a district haven't provided the level set of what needs to be known to then go forward, which is on me and us. And so,
And that's what you're in the process of planning
exactly.
for.
yeah, for the fall.
I do have one question, which might be like a parking lot type question, but I think I am interested in understanding the connections or the relationship between this work that you're describing and our French immersion program, as far as like at what point or what is the, I'm thinking especially for our first and second grade French teachers, you know, so understanding that all of our students are accessing the phonemic awareness skills through kindergarten and or pre-K and kindergarten rather, and then they branch. And, you know, I know that we've been using the same curriculum in French for quite some time, and I'm just wondering, like, I know that's not your department, but like, is that a conversation that's happening as well to make sure that the science of reading is being incorporated and reflected in French as well, you know, and then watching it merge back together in the, you know, third and fourth grades as students begin to regain instruction time in English. And I'm just curious. I don't expect you to have all the answers
no,
to that,
and
but-
I can't speak to the curricular materials and resources as in depth as Zena Hamada could, but I do know that I did share this with our principal and coordinator team on Monday or Tuesday? No, Friday.
Yeah,
And I did share that, you know, as I proposed or sort of like projected my thoughts about next year, in no way was claiming it, or, you know, it wasn't formal or finalized, but it was received with a lot of, you know, this is great. And then specifically from Zena was, this would be great for French immersion teachers too. So it would be a universally consumed approach. Again, because that first chunk of the plan has nothing to do with curricular materials. It's all about the pedagogy.
Right.
Again, not that it doesn't have any, you know, we'll obviously make connections to what the resources we have, but it can be applied to anything. But to your point is well taken. I think it's something that to be considered, especially when students re-enter in that 3, 4, and 5, English and French.
So, just another question. So, is the curriculum, planned curriculum review just K through 5?
Yes, so 6 to 8 did a review in 2019, 2020, implemented in fall of 2020.
Yep.
So probably 2 years or so. We don't have like a formal schedule, but I would say following this, like afterwards would probably be when we'd assess effective implementation.
Yeah, I mean, some of this, I mean, there are a lot of different ways to look at curricular adoption and thinking of every area separately versus in a more of an integrated way, or a kind of a interdisciplinary / transdisciplinary way is another approach. So it's something we haven't really talked about it at much length, but to me, like as I think about all of our different curricular areas, I think I think of them as one, and because I'm thinking of it as a system, and if we're looking at adopting curricula that often reflects a change, a pedagogical shift, or often can, in terms of how that curriculum is laid out, what's the structure of it, what are the specific kind of didactic directions within it for instructors, right? And textbooks have changed over time too, right? Like people used to open a textbook and start at page 1 and go through, and we've slowly moved away, and so it's something that we need to talk about, I think, as a team, is what is our vision for what does that process look like, and is it necessarily thinking of it as this year's social studies, next year's math? Mm-hmm. Because development happens at all different times. Mm-hmm. I mean, we might do 3 adoptions of math in 3 years because study of math and understanding of math pedagogy is shifting significantly, which is impacting the curriculum that people are using. So to tie it to this like rote kind of like timeline, to me, doesn't conceptually make sense in terms of how I see kind of education developing, but it's something that we need to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah, it just connects to the pieces you've named around change management and
Yeah.
change burnout and all that stuff, and like how do you and how do you have time to delve into it, across all the things. I think the only other thing I was also thinking with the K through 5 piece is just, plans for a lower versus upper middle school, right? If you're moving 5th and 6th grade to be kind of contained within the same house, like creating some coherence between that jump from 5th grade to 6th grade, more so than potentially we have right now or need right now with the changes, given that those teachers will be in the same building, and opportunities for cross collaboration will probably be helpful. Just one last other thing, what's our social studies curriculum? I feel like I should have that, and I just don't. I know
Savas.
What's that?
Savas.
Okay, thank you.
So I do have a question.
Sure.
You mentioned the middle school
Yeah.
English curriculum.
Yep.
How has that been going once it's been, you said in 1920 it was implemented?
So teachers are implementing at least 3 and up to 5 units of study each grade. They've, over the last 3 years, selected novels to use in addition to. The curriculum is Amplify ELA, and it's highly rated on Ed Reports. It is centered around thematic units that integrate both literary and informational text that are balanced. And it's typically higher than grade level text because the text is worked with during class and often done more synthesis and writing. But yeah, had department meetings today, and we went through the upcoming units, so.
Great.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then, so I just had one final, just a comment. Is it possible to link the page that you created to the curriculum page on our MPS website temporarily?
Which page?
I think it should.
mean
Yeah,
the-
Because I
it
don't
should be.
see
Is it not there?
I
I
thought
don't
it was
see it
there.
on this
Is
one.
it not? Okay.
Because I see
Yeah,
we're
I'll-
linked.
I mean,
Yeah.
It's on there.
Okay. Let me. I'll make a note and I'll.
Yeah.
Okay.
verify
Because I
it.
didn't
How's that?
see it in
I
there.
think I mean, we are building
No,
a
I
new
know.
website.
No, I know. I was just temporarily,
Right.
if
Yeah.
people wanted to
Yeah.
find that
It
information.
is
Yeah.
on. I mean, you're talking about the web page, or you're talking about some other?
My, like.
Oh, this presentation.
Your page.
No. My
No.
preschool
It's-
to 12.
It links from the, so
it does.
if you
It's
go
on-
to
yeah,
curriculum,
yeah.
so if you go to departments, curriculum is a drop down. And then it's under,
ELA.
English language arts at the bottom of that drop down. It is confusing because it's like a drop down within a drop down, like the formatting is really hard to
Website.
see.
Exciting.
Oh, okay. No.
A lot riding on this new
But it's a
website.
good illustration
Oh, no.
of that it's not easy to find.
Literacy grades? Okay. I'll look for it later.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's,
We'll just put it on the homepage. There's that. Welcome. Here's the ELA
How about in
site.
quick news?
What's that?
We'll put it in quick news.
There you go.
Quick news. Great.
It's a new category we're going to create.
Oh, good. I was like,
yeah.
am I supposed to know about quick news? Because I don't. Great.
Or the
Awesome.
flash when you have a snow day. Some websites you can
Oh, yeah.
you open
Just
the
have, like,
page
a
and it
ticker
just
tape
flashes.
running.
Or ticker, yeah. Yeah, I've seen those. Those are cool.
ELA updates.
Exactly. Just put it right there. Picture me.
Text with everyone's phone at home.
Yeah, exactly. They'll love that. I'll get a lot of good traffic.
Selena or Beverly, do you have anything more for Kat? Okay. Thanks again for
Thank you
Thank
coming.
you
so
so
much for
much.
having me.
Really
Yes.
appreciate you
Yeah,
coming in.
Absolutely. Have a good night.
Look forward to
Getting
staying in the
updates.
loop.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks.
I'd just say once again, I really appreciate the direction of bringing these conversations to these
Yes.
meetings versus a separate group, right? Like that change that we made at the start of the year.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
really
Oh,
appreciate it.
absolutely. And I think this is great if we can make this kind of a regular thing, because I think it really helps all of us understand and also answer questions that
Yeah.
come up. You know.
Well, and I know that you had moved also, that we're still kind of working with this concept of a comprehensive curriculum updates where it's like a team. I mean, that's good because you don't want to only ever keep content areas in silos or different, like different
Yeah.
directors
They're both
kind of not
helpful,
talk.
but
We
yeah.
need both. I mean, that having a deep dive into one area is, yeah, it's valuable. Okay, so let's see. Where's our?
There it is. Okay.
Is that
report.
everything under your report?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so now we're at the chair's report, and thank you, Peter, for having shared your evidence pertaining to your evaluation as we kind of prepare to do this process together. So it was, I mean, I think you organized everything very clearly as far as giving us your evidence for each of the standards. I personally appreciated the overviews because there's just a lot in the folders. But this evening, this part of the conversation, we had just built in as the opportunity for those of us who've been able to begin digesting this evidence to share clarifying questions with you if there were things that were, that we needed to better understand in order to use what you have provided us to complete the evaluation rubrics, which, after we see what clarifying questions, if any, people have, then we'll just kind of run back through what our process is going to be in the coming week for actually completing the evaluation. But does anybody have any clarifying questions at this point based on the shared folder?
It's a good sign.
It's a lot of documents. I can't say I've looked through all of them in order to have questions on all of them, but from the list of things, it seems like the vast majority are things we've discussed here or you previously shared. So, for my initial review, so no questions on my end.
Yes, I agree. Having the kind of description for each is really helpful, and I have not read through all of them. But thank you for putting all of those together for us, and so I don't have any questions. And Mark, thank you for sending out this the evaluation report to all of us.
Thanks for your help with that.
Yeah, so thank you.
Selena or Beverly, do you have any questions? Okay. So yeah, I think this just proves that you've done an exceptionally clear job of presenting this, because we didn't really need the clarifying questions. And I think we all just have a lot of work to do at this point as we process all of this great evidence, information that you've compiled. So that is kind of what we can overview now. So Anna, as you mentioned, yes, Mark said we should have all received. Mark emailed us the template rubric. So yes, thank you for having pulled that together. And the document does include the reminders of our timeline for doing this project. So where we're at is each of us has access to this shared folder. We have access to the overviews, which sum up the contents of each of the folders to each of the rubrics indicators, and then we have all of the things that you've put in there. So between now and Sunday night, each of us independently is reading through those folders, using the template that we have from Mark, and we'll make, is that uploaded in our folder?
Yeah, I think so. It depends on which folder we're talking about.
We'll make sure that that is
It's the one that has
living in the folder as well.
It's in the evaluation committee folder.
Okay.
But I
There's
don't,
another
I don't think I
folder
put
that
it in
Charlene
the
sent,
mid-cycle evaluation folder. So I can put it there too.
Okay. So we have the template.
And just to be clear on the template, obviously Peter listed all the
Indicators.
and so I just went through, and anything that's blacked out is because it's not an indicator he has listed under any of his goals. They're not focus indicators based on the goals, so blacked it out so we don't need to do it. Hopefully that was clear, but just want to name that in case I screwed up and blacked out one we should
this
be.
one right here?
Yes,
Is
exactly.
that what you're talking about?
Yes,
Okay,
like 2C
got it.
as the example.
So we're each going to be making a copy of the template, filling it out for ourselves, uploading that by Sunday night into the shared folder among the 6 of us. That means that on Monday, our evaluation subcommittee, Mark, Anna, and me, have what we need to go through, look at what has been submitted by the 6 of us, and do our best to synthesize those into one document, which we will then share out to the full school committee. People will have the opportunity to read through that, and it will be at that point like a working draft where you can ensure that you feel your feedback was accurately reflected in the compilation of the shared the full evaluation. I would say we'll communicate back out about this after Monday's meeting. When we send that out, we can make sure to everyone understands what would be your process for sharing if you had a question or a concern. You would probably share that feedback. Well, we'll talk that through and get that clear. And it will then be April 2nd. We'll share that to you. The timeline, we're going to give that to you by when? Let's see.
Tuesday at 6:57.
Great.
Yeah, we will give it to
By
you.
the end of the week, at latest.
At least the day before. So you have that whole day to read through it and whatnot, and then we'll have the conversation on April 2nd, where we'll discuss it and vote to approve that document. I like the way we're laying out this process because it means that there shouldn't be any surprises. Everybody's input is incorporated along the way before that evening of April 2nd. And I think it's going to be great. We're we're figuring this out as we go, but we're actually, you're supporting us a lot by guiding us with a really strong structure to it. So this is going to be good. And any questions at this point about where we're headed? I hope no one has any weekend plans. I only have like dawn to dusk kids activities and sports. I don't know about the rest of you. So we'll get
The
it
benefit
done.
is you've seen a number of these documents, so
Already,
some of
that's
this
true.
some of this will be review.
Yeah.
There are obviously some internal documents that you haven't seen, working with teams, et cetera, that
Yep.
are provided as well, but some of these you've seen.
Yep. And, just to call out one thing which is named within the template, but it is going to be really important for us as individuals. The comments, there are the spaces to add comments, and that is really important to do for any time that we select something other than proficient for a category. So whether we're saying it's exemplary or it needs improvement, then it's very important to give clear explanation for why that's the case. And that's what those comment boxes are for. And we can comment on proficient too, of course, but yeah. All right. Well, here we go. It's gonna be fun. And yeah, that's, sorry, I don't know, does anyone else getting like frowny faces and you have to keep reloading your tabs? And then they come back.
Nope.
I think my computer, I have too many tabs
Is that a
open.
Mac?
I think it's-
Brown
I
faces?
don't get
It's
one.
bad.
Yeah.
So,
Get frowny faces on the computer.
all right, so we have our work cut out for us. That's the chair's report. We'll move on to the committee reports, and first is finance. Beverly.
Oh,
Bev, we can't hear you. It must be on I think it's on our end.
Yeah, this is
This is not, this is something on this end.
Sorry, hold on.
Time for us to take shots at them while they can't
If
say
you
anything.
need to, you can call into my phone, and I can put it on speaker.
Did you just say that we're taking shots?
Take shots at them.
Oh.
oh.
I was like, oh, it is already 8:30. I have my ginger wine.
We have some music.
Okay. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. I'm not sure what number I called you on, but I
You
figured.
can hear
It
us so we're
works.
good, right?
Oh, she's
It
back
works.
on. She's on that.
All right, so I have three motions
Now we
here
hear her.
that require a vote.
We just turned them
Actually,
on.
first motion-
We got you on Zoom now.
Okay. Okay, I heard it's working now. Is
Yes.
that correct?
Yep.
Okay, so we have three motions to vote on. The first motion is related to the 2025 budget and identifying a possible funding source to support the needs-based budget. So the motion is to request that the Capital Planning Improvement Committee decrease their recommendation for school technology devices by $200,000 and remove the $45,000 recommendation for facilities related to the floor scrubbing and cleaning, and that the town administrator and select board amend the fiscal year 25 budget recommendation to allocate that $245,000 of free cash to the school department operating budget. Can I get a motion?
Yeah, we can
Actually,
put,
there
we
are
can do
questions,
this
but can I
again.
get a
We can
motion?
put the motion on the floor and then maybe get a little bit of explanation just to make sure we're all understanding where this is coming from. So I'll make the motion.
Sure, I'll
Is there-
second for discussion.
Mark, okay. So,
Yeah, we can share.
Bev,
So-
what's your-
What's that?
I was wondering, Bev, did you want to speak to this? You want me to speak to this?
I'm happy to. Essentially, when you have an opportunity to use free cash to fund some of the needs-based budget that was identified in the budget that we presented. And as I stated, it's much easier if you're reading it. It's a mouthful if you haven't seen it. Essentially, there are two opportunities to financially make this happen. One is the first recommendation, which is, so Mark, I can see you highlighting. So
I'm sorry.
as I'm talking.
I do that
Is
as
to use the technology devices and essentially move 200,000 of that to capital planning, and then removing some floor scrubbing and cleaning equipment. I don't know if you want to add anything else to that, Glenn, but feel free.
The idea behind that was this year, due to a grant, we can allocate a little less towards the technology equipment, which is the Chromebooks and computer replacements and so forth, because we have a little bit of grant money that we can use to offset some of that. And this year, if you look at it, it's a little less than 1/5 of the devices that need to be replaced. They're on a 5-year replacement cycle.
and that
So-
just came in.
That's, I was working with Bob Haddison about that and our technology director to look at
Yeah.
whether we could afford to decrease that request a little bit for this year, because we do have some funds available. The other piece with the floor scrubbers, currently all of our floor scrubbing equipment is functional. That could be put off for 1 year, because we had put that in there, Chris Hayden had put that in there as a replacement schedule for some of the equipment that we use in the summer to and during the year to clean the floors. But in fact, they do have all a little more life on them, and we could do without replacing the two. That was to replace 2 of them. We could do without that this year, because currently all the schools have them, and they are all functional.
So just for clarification, it's not the $45,000 he mentioned that he potentially could use for design services
No,
for the
that's
4th floor?
different.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's different.
And so if one of the floor scrubbers were to, so if this went through and one of the floor scrubbers did end up needing to be replaced in the coming year, we would be able to work with that based on the ones we have?
Yeah, we would have to use some of our maintenance budget, or possibly some of, for a lot of the maintenance, we use rental fees to do a lot of maintenance in these buildings, so I would dip into the rental fee revolving fund if we, in an emergency like that.
And then
That's
does,
technically, actually, that's how we've gotten them all in the past. None of our floor scrubbers have we ever capitalized before. We've always bought them out of operating funds year over year.
Okay.
They're about 20,000 a piece. And it was 45 for 2 of them, and a few backpack vacuums.
And just one thing I wanted to add is, in terms of positions, and we shared this, I think, with our warrant committee presentation, that the places that we would be utilizing these funds for would be to make the 6th grade team whole at the middle school, adding an interventionist, and adding an adjustment counselor. So those are the 4 positions we'd be looking to add with those funds.
And so just recognizing, anticipating the questions that might come up. I think wanting to make it clear that we understand it's not ever ideal to use free cash to support positions. We have done that in the past, but we're asking to be able to do this now because of how badly we need these positions, as we've explained for months now through the need-based budget process. And this, as you're explaining, Glenn, just seems, and Bev, like this just seems to be the opportunity to kind of reallocate requests that we can best absorb, essentially, is what you're saying?
Yes, and
Yeah.
it does involve, to be fair, putting more free cash into operating budgets, but as the warrant committee expressed the other night, and the select board has expressed, we have, by not having an override this year, we really need to make some corrections next year and look at an override scenario for next year. So this is going to have to be addressed one way or the other. It is a slightly bigger hole, but we're in a really big hole right now for fiscal 25 in the budget process in terms of the amount of free cash being used to balance the budget. So,
And this would mean that the most urgent needs for the class size issue at Pierce and the need for the reading intervention and the adjustment counselor support, which we saw in the Student Opportunities Act referenced piece. So this would be the way that we could address those needs right now for students in the fall.
these would be in an override next year in one form or another, whether
Whether
to
we have
replace
it
the
next
free
year or
cash
not.
that you're using this year, or
Yeah.
if you didn't, we would still need the positions. So
But then the students
this is
would not
trying-
have had them next
right,
year.
This is an attempt to get them into the classroom a year earlier.
Yeah, and I think this is, given the request to prioritize, I think Peter and the leadership team appropriately identified the class size at the middle school. And I believe that if any additional funds or grants come through that take some pressure off the operating budget, we have the opportunity to add positions from that need-based budget. So I'm optimistic that slowly but surely I'm hoping that we'll get a few more before this is all done. But I really appreciate the work of the leadership team and Glenn and Peter in identifying opportunities to realize these positions this fiscal year. And I'm hoping that we'll get more. Thank you.
So I just have a couple of clarifying questions. So free cash, it's one-time use funds, right? So next year we would add these positions onto the budget. Okay. And then does adding a sixth grade whole team then help with the seventh and eighth grade issue as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it essentially right now, from my understanding, and Glenn can help me here, but the eighth grade team with the bubble moving right at Pierce, the sixth grade team would be teaching 4 instead of 5 and would pick up an exploratory. So there would be a balance then, so that the eighth grade team wouldn't be, so they would have more capacity. So that's kind of how.
Okay.
That's kind of the approach.
So the exploratory teachers are freed up slightly because of the
Yes.
expansion of the sixth grade to support more with the eighth grade.
Yeah.
Instead of adding
Yeah.
more teachers for the eighth
Right,
grade to
right.
pick that up.
And then it also makes that sixth grade team whole as well.
Yeah.
And that has been feedback we heard this year, that the half team is going well, but they would like to make that whole, and so that this kind
Well,
of
especially with
realizes
the
that
extra
as well.
large incoming sixth grade.
Sixth grade.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a good 2 birds, 1 stone
yeah, yeah.
solution.
And then Glenn, you think like we're in a larger hole for next year. Do you kind of have a dollar amount of what we're looking at just going into next year?
Think back in terms of the town. I mean, last year the town used almost $1 million in free cash to balance the budget for this year.
Not counting
Now you're
ARPA.
looking at about double that. You're looking at about 1.8 million in free cash and plus some ARPA funds that they're using. So it's a little over $2 million in one-time funds that balances the fiscal 25 budget proposal as it stands now.
Okay.
So this is the difference between 2.2 and 2.4 million dollars in one-time funds balancing the budget. Neither one of those is a great scenario, and either one of those will push us towards an override scenario for next year.
Okay.
Because that you obviously can't continue stacking more and more on, because you will run out of one-time funds.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, more of this is this year I think we're like $2.5 million in one-time funds
If you-
because of ARPA.
Yeah.
Right, it's not all like, so with free cash and ARPA, so it's holding somewhat constant,
It's a lot.
unfortunately. Is there, so there was, how big was the grant for the Chromebooks?
It's part of a different, it's part of an E-rate and a few other
Yeah.
things that we're going to move a few things around. Some things came in, we are virtualizing servers and things like that, and some of the prices came in less, so we can use some of the E-rate money to do some other things.
Gotcha.
So it's moving things around. But
Okay.
Bob thought he could, we could go from $500,000 for all, technology all in to 300 for this year and still manage.
Yeah, because the original Chromebook budget was 400.
Right,
and so
and-
we're cutting that in half.
Well, it's Chromebooks and laptops and
Yeah.
the few desktops that we still have. It's a more or less generic technology replacement budget because it does also takes into account, for instance, the overhead projectors and things like that when they break and all that sort of stuff. It's a general technology. The bulk of it is Chromebooks for sure.
Yeah, and then in addition to that, there was the 125 or something like that for infrastructure, right? And so
Yeah.
that is not being touched.
No.
Was there an ability to use bonding for that piece at all, or for anything else? Thought that was something that potentially the town administrator was looking
Networking equipment?
Yes, given that that has greater than a 5-year life expectancy.
There are other
It was
options.
a grant or something, correct?
Yeah, we have actually applied for a grant to try to get, right now we put in capital for one or two schools, I think it was.
Yeah.
We are looking at a grant option that just arose that was just submitted last week, and we'll see how well we do, which might allow us to accelerate that and actually, in the best case scenario, do the ball through the grant, take it off the capital, in future years. So we're hoping, but it's, you never know with grants.
Yeah, I don't want to be.
And plus, it's a state grant.
It is fantastic. It's fantastic that we are able to get an additional $245,000 to go towards staffing at our schools and fill some of these holes. Obviously, that is not the 1075 number we were hoping for. So there still remain significant holes at the high school with an additional reading interventionist, with additional counselors, which again everybody on here knows, and so don't mean to speak to the repeat things you've already heard, but just naming, if continue push if there are other opportunities for, again, bonding any of these expenses through the town capital project instead of just using the free cash and not freeing up anything, or if there, again, I really appreciate the work you're doing regarding grant funding. I think that's great. Any year, certainly right now when money is tight, being able to find that, because it seems like we still won't have I assume the interventionists you'll pick between 4th or 5th grade, so one of those won't have.
Well, I think part of our approach is going to be, not part of it, but the approach will be to look preschool through 12th grade.
Yeah.
So as we build out MTSS, we may look at our concentration and look at student need, and that interventionist stream should be flexible based on student need. So that's kind of more how I'm looking at it. I know we're talking about it as 4 or 5, but really what we're talking about is building a coherent continuum.
Yep.
And obviously
And just-
a lot of that is stacked towards K1, 2, right? Like is 3 is kind of like the prime zone.
Yeah.
Sorry, Bev.
No, I was just going to ask a clarifying question about the grant. If the grant comes through, is it the intention to have one of the additional needs-based positions brought online?
I'm not sure, because the grant, what we've applied for the grant is basically the infrastructure that is in the out years of the budget, the out years of the capital budget proposal. So that doesn't free up money initially. It frees up money in capital in forthcoming years, but it's not cash in hand at the moment. And even if we we're able to get more and do the money that's currently in the capital budget, that's still freeing up capital money. That would be, I don't think we would know that in time to do anything at town meeting with it. We don't know the timeline on this grant response.
So then maybe,
So I don't
Mark, to
think it's
Mark's
gonna-
point, maybe we should proceed with bonding it if we can, because if the grant comes through and it's of not any support to bringing in more of the needs-based positions, maybe we should proceed with bonding it.
With bonding, are you talking about like an adjustment within this change we're discussing right now, or additional request to capital to make that as a shift?
It would be an additional request to capital planning to make the shift. Not to be debated today, just food for thought.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea there, or with any of this, and the work that's already been done, and so again, just don't mean to gloss over an additional $245,000, especially when most other departments are not getting that, and so name that, appreciate that. But like, is there, as it relates to providing you the resources you need, the staff the resource they need to address the learning loss and the things we know we're trying to do for our kids, is that another area in which, I mean, that's $125,000, so that's, by math of the 245 giving us however many 4 positions, it'd be another 2 positions. So yes, any of that continued thinking until obviously the clock at some point is going to run out on us.
That's what I was just about to say. I think the clock might be basically run out.
Yeah.
I think that as as it stands already, and if we vote to make this request tonight, it will be a request to for Capital Planning Improvement Committee to reopen the capital budget, which then has to get reapproved by Select Board and then go back to the warrant committee. So I think in making...
So do we want to add it now as an option?
Yeah,
If we know that we can't go back to the well, similar to how we had the optional portion of the budget to subsidize dual enrollment, maybe we put it in here now.
Yeah,
And in the event that it works out, we can.
or something around like, just general ability to move capital requests to the bonding and free up. I don't know if there's some general language that could be added that just provides then you and the rest of the capital planning committee flexibility if it turns out, obviously I assume with it conversations with the town administrator, that something like that would be possible.
Right.
And again, maybe it is not, but prevents the timeline issue that I think you're raising from needing to come back to school committee to then be voted on to then go back to capital improvement.
Well, and quite honestly, I mean, I'm just, I'm just going to say what I'm thinking and be honest, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So I think I don't take for granted that we can get this request actually approved.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I hope we can.
Yeah.
I think we need to really make the case for it. And I would like to just try to make sure that we don't, I think there's like a balance.
Take too big a bite.
Yeah, I think I would like to make sure we can get those 4 top priority positions that have been identified as if we don't get those, we are going to have a serious problem.
But I'm not sure how building in flexibility makes those 4 positions somehow vulnerable or compromised. Is there concern that the networking equipment doesn't have a greater than 5-year useful life?
I think that's been up for debate. I think it's been understood as on the I think there seem to be different opinions on that, where some people think it is and some people think it's a little bit less.
Networking equipment?
And I think that my underlying point is I would just like to essentially not, it's what you said, Mark.
Yeah. But it comes across as being too asking for too much when you make people opposed to the whole ask.
Plus, if you look at the capital budget, the hardware and infrastructure upgrades, $135,000 is listed as town technology. It's not strictly schools. There isn't a school technology
Oh, I thought it
call
was.
out there.
Because the schools in and of itself had, or
The
was it
schools
just
had
as
the floor scrubbers at $45,000 in free cash. The educational space conversion, $50,000 in free cash. The architectural and engineering services for build-outs and so forth was $50,000 in free cash. School technology was the $500,000 of various different technologies. And those were the ones from free cash. The ones
Yeah,
that
I remember.
were bonded were some school facilities, exterior door and hardware replacement, flooring replacement, tile,
Yep.
Cunningham attic, of course. So there isn't a school network piece that we can say we want to take out of free cash and put into bonding. It's a broader category than that. It's really a town technology piece.
Yeah, and that's why I'm hesitating to
Yeah.
open that door, because I think what we're talking about requesting right now is a clear-cut case of we've identified urgent priorities that just motivate us to absorb whatever challenges we'll face through not replacing the floor scrubber or the, moving around the money to get the technology that we need in hand, so.
Plus, you remember that we're still early. There was testimony by MASC and MASS on the Hill
Right.
asking for instance, the $30 per student minimum aid to be increased to $60. That
Yep.
for Milton would be another $135,000, and that would be, an adjustment to the recommendations at town meeting, because we never have that in time for the warrant by the time the state budget comes around. But you have a better estimation of what's going to be there.
Yeah.
So, that could be one of the so-called green sheets at town meeting where it said we're amending it, by this amount. It's not the article in the warrant, it's this instead. So there is still room for movement between now and May. This is not the last chance we have to make a request.
But it is the chance to go back to capital.
This is reasonably, you're hitting the end of time to go to capital. I mean, you have only one more meeting scheduled to vote the minutes, basically, and so that it will matter reopening the budget. And given that the warrant's going to press in 2 weeks or less, and they'd like to have at least the capital part solid, I think, this is reasonably the last time to talk about capital.
Thanks for the clarification, I appreciate it. So we had a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Oh, you have to roll call.
Yeah,
A roll call, all right. Member Vargas?
Yes.
Member Loring?
Yes.
Dr. Miranda? Yes. Dr. Carroll?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. And now we have 2 warrants to approve. I need a motion to approve vendor warrant 35 in the amount of $290,127.60, payable on March 7th, 2024.
So moved.
Can I get a
Second.
second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Dr. Miranda?
Yes.
Dr. Carroll?
Yes.
Member Loring?
Yes.
Member Varghese?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. And then last but most certainly not least, I need a motion to approve vendor warrant number 36 in the amount of $627,551.83, payable on March 14th, 2024. Can I get a motion?
So moved?
And a second?
Second.
All right. Member Loring?
Yes.
Member Varghese?
Yes.
Dr. Carroll?
Yes.
Dr. Miranda?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. And that's it for the Finance Subcommittee voting.
Thank you so much. So that brings us to policy.
So for policy, we need to approve the second reading of policy AD, which is our mission statement, and policy ADC, tobacco-free schools. Could I get a motion to approve the second reading of both of these policies?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I'll do a roll call vote. Bev?
Yes.
Selena?
Yes.
Lizzie?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. That, okay, facilities.
So Facilities Advisory Subcommittee met earlier today, talked about a few things. One thing to highlight is it was the last meeting of our current Consolidated Facilities Director, Chris Hayden. So once again, I know we said this when the new Consolidated Facilities Director was hired, but I want to thank Chris for his service over the last year and all that he did to help, especially on that committee, carry forward kind of some of the projects, Cunningham fourth floor being one of those, but additional work that he did to kind of help us look at short-term, medium-term space solutions. There's still lots of work that needs to go forward, and we're excited to work on that with the new director, but again, really appreciate the work Chris did. Want to shout him out. And he'll still be in Milton, so we'll still get to bother him at Pierce Players and things like that. He gave a report on some things that were completed over the February break, just some random improvements at each of the schools and some work we're trying to do around heat issues within certain classrooms. We're trying out some ceiling fans and some shades. He and his team installed those in a few sample classrooms to see if that helps with heat, as we're thinking of low-cost, fiscally responsible, and quick solutions that could be implemented to help teachers and students within spaces. So that is stuff that is going to be installed over the next few weeks, probably over April break, so we're excited for that. Discussed Cunningham fourth floor, and again, other potential programmatic ideas for Cunningham fourth floor. He's currently in conversations with DRA about coming up with a proposal for that, and they've done walkthroughs, initial designs, and so it's not 100% settled on what that will be, but we're awaiting that from DRA, and that project is moving forward in hopes that it gets the funding through the town meeting. So excited about that. We talked a little about some document storage work that's going to be a big part of clearing out the fourth floor at Cunningham, but also there are other spaces within that. So continue to discuss what we can do as a committee to support with that work. Ideas for playground improvements and some long-term thinking around how we do that equitably across all the schools. And then talked a little bit about the transition, again, between Chris and his successor within that space. And that was about our full hour. Anything else?
No.
Okay.
Thank you for keeping us to our 1 hour meeting. It was great. Great job.
We didn't hit one of the agenda items, so it wasn't that great. But thanks.
Thank you. Do either of you have any questions online? Okay. So approval of minutes. We have, where are those?
February 28th and March 6th.
Yeah. Okay.
Want to make a motion?
Yeah, let's see. I'm sorry, I actually missed that we had March 6th. May I just have a moment to review these? I'm sorry. I don't know how I missed that.
We also have a meeting next week, right? So we could just delay them if you want. That's governance, so 2 weeks.
What do you wondering about?
Governance next
Oh,
week.
yeah.
We don't usually vote for minutes.
Yeah, no, I can look at. These are just extra long because of all the information that was pasted in. All right, I'm good. Yeah, I only, on the February 28th, I just put the note in there. It can be changed. It looked like it got hyperlinked in there.
Oh, that can happen sometimes.
Yeah, so I
It's
just
a new Google thing.
don't know if that should be taken out or if they get converted into like PDFs. I don't know.
It'll go away, yeah.
That was my
But
only
it
thing
might, the formatting might look weird.
for the email address that got linked in. Did anyone else have any edits to the minutes? Okay, so I think we were all here for both of these sets, so we can just take this as one motion to approve the minutes of the Milton School Committee meetings of February 8th, 2024 and March 6th, 2024.
February 28th.
28th, sorry.
February 28th and March 6th, 2024.
I'll second that.
Okay. So I made the motion, you second. Anna?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Selena?
Yes.
Bev?
Yes.
I'm a yes. So that's good. And then our next meeting, as you just mentioned, is next Wednesday, our governance retreat, spring governance retreat. Our agenda is to just continue our operating procedures. I'll be sending out the updated draft of that document so that we can look at it beforehand and then just have the goal of pushing that farther towards completion during that time next week. And then we will meet on April 2nd for our next regular meeting, which is different as a Tuesday. And that's when our main agenda item will be the superintendent's evaluation, and we'll have various subcommittee meetings at that, reports at that point, like policy, I know we will have. So we can catch up on that next week. Any other?
Do we expect, you were mentioning the residency piece that's going to go likely through policy before this year, and obviously that's
Yeah,
not going to be
that
next
wouldn't
week.
be by the 2nd, yeah.
Okay. Any other items? Okay. So then we'll just be back here on the 27th. We'll be doing our homework in the meantime. And yeah, hope everybody has a good rest of the week.
You'll be doing the statement of interest on the 2nd for the MSBA, right?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Thank you. I could
On the
run
2nd.
save the day. I should have
MSBA.
flagged that.
Well, but it's like done already, thanks to you. So,
Well,
But it
you
needs
gotta-
to be
You
voted.
got to have the vote.
right. No, you've
Yeah.
put in work to get that done already. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Okay. And we still have time, obviously. This is week after next we're talking about. So, okay. Then can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Beverly, you seconded?
Yes.
Okay. Beverly, all in
Yes.
favor? Selena?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
You've gotten very official. I mean, it's
Gavel.